Hey G fans, it's Joshua here, excuse me, with the next episode of Godzilla Dissection. This episode was a long time coming, and I'm going to be covering Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, the second film in the Godzilla Millennium series. And I'm approaching about the halfway point of the whole Godzilla Dissection series overall. So, with that said, how do I feel about this movie? Well, people watched my Godzilla-thon from years ago, and now I'm basically perfecting it with the Godzilla Dissection and my, more refreshed and more open views on the series as a whole. This movie gets a lot of mixed reviews. Like, basically every movie in the Millennium series gets mixed reviews, whether people love or hate them usually. But you got things like Godzilla Final Wars and GMK in 2000. To me, this is always one of the better of the Millennium series. I mean, the Millennium series comes in it comes in 6 movies, and to me, the top 3 is the top 3 bad. And Megaguirus to me is one of the top 3 of the Millennium series, right behind GMK and Tokyo SOS, and that's for a number of reasons. But let's get into the movie itself. It's the 25th film in the franchise, 24th directly released by Toho itself, and not by Americans. And it was released in the year of 2000, and to me it's ironic because this to me is the true Godzilla 2000. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you watch my Godzilla 2000 dissection, it criticized the movie not for its effects really, and not for its monster design, although that was definitely a part of it. It criticized it for its storyline first and foremost because it was not a proper retelling of the Godzilla origin and the Godzilla mythos. If you look at 1954 Godzilla and then compare it to 1984 Godzilla, they have a lot in common. Godzilla was reborn as a threat to mankind. There's a very allegorical meaning to his existence. That obviously being nuclear weapons and whatnot. And of course, it's just he's something that he's definitely a villain, but he's also an anti-hero in a lot of ways that he reminds us of the worst parts of ourselves. And to me, Godzilla 2000 missed a lot of that for a very basically, let me just be honest, a very subpar storyline. Godzilla fighting aliens was a concept from the 70s that hadn't been used for a very long time for a very good reason. No one takes Godzilla and aliens seriously. And like I said in my Godzilla 2000 dissection, if you're going to include aliens, you have to do it in the right way. It needs to be an epic showdown. Godzilla vs. Monster Zero had 3 monsters in it. A lot of city destruction, a lot of monster fighting. The whole world was at stake. Destroy All Monsters took it even further. Had even more monsters. The whole world was getting screwed up. We actually saw it this time. We saw Rodan destroying Moscow. We saw Godzilla destroying New York. And then, of course, the whole plot line went to shit in the 70s with Godzilla vs. Gigan and just silliness. And then after that, Toho had abandoned the idea for a long time. We had a vague resemblance of the idea in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, but those people were from the future. They were still humans. So as cheesy as it was, you could still get away with it, and it was entertaining, cheesy sci-fi, and not just poorly written fucking dialogue and poorly written stories. Godzilla 2000 was not poorly written, but the aliens were not engaging. We never actually saw the aliens flying the ship or anything like that. All we saw was the organism that came from the ship combining with Godzilla's DNA, which came honestly too late into the movie to care at that point. Not to mention the fact that it turned from a jellyfish-looking monster into a fucking rancor-looking monster. So, what was there to get excited about? Technically speaking, nothing, honestly. Honestly, nothing. But that's the fault of the writers behind Godzilla 2000. So for Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, they got an interesting team together to write the movie. You got Wataru Mimura. Wataru Mimura Wataru Mamura wrote Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. If you don't know what that is, there's several variants, but basically he wrote the 1993 film from the Heisei era, known in America as Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, even though it has nothing to do with the 70s movies, technically speaking. And they combined him with one of the newer writers, Hiroshi Kashawabara. So these guys came together to write a very interesting story with, don't get me wrong, a whole lot of cheese and pseudoscience and honestly some plot holes as far as plausibility, but it was a more interesting story and more true to Godzilla mythos than Godzilla 2000. In so many ways it hurts. So I guess the next thing really to do is delve into that. But before I get into that, let me delve into the backstory behind this movie. I've already explained this before, but I'll explain it again. Godzilla, the Millennium series takes place in an alternate reality series where basically none of the movies, other than Tokyo SOS and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, are connected to each other timeline-wise. So basically all of them reference the 54 film, and Tokyo SOS and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla are set up in their own universe, which includes things like Mothra and War of the Gargantuans. However, everything else is erased. Heisei, previous Millennium, and other Showa Godzilla movies are non-existent. So with that said, this movie does the same old thing, it's retelling the story yet again, they got 2000 retold. And if you look at the box office wise, this was the worst performing movie of the Millennium series. It got just enough money to break even, which in the film business usually is not a good thing. And this is a common syndrome in the post-Showa era. It basically suffered the same fate as Godzilla's Biollante. People write a very interesting story. It's very different. Different types of characters, different types of monsters that are unheard of, not classic ones being revamped like King Ghidorah Rodan. And it fails at the box office. And to me, you see the same pattern with Godzilla's Biollante. Like I said, Godzilla's Biollante introduced a new-looking Godzilla, a new monster, Biollante, a very different story than anything that really had come before it, Godzilla-wise. And audiences were hesitant to accept it, which is a sad thing to observe, but definitely true. And the same thing happened with Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. A new monster, not a new look for Godzilla, but a very different story than what had just come before it, and audiences were hesitant to accept it, so it did poorly at the box office, which is pretty sad, considering to me it's a lot better than Godzilla 2000. Getting to the story, the basic story is this, summing it up very quickly. Humans have been dealing with Godzilla for a while. In this reality, he's attacked about 3 times. Once in the 50s, once in the 60s, and then once again in the 90s. And then it sets the precedent for the main storyline, where the G-Graspers are trying to deal with Godzilla. Now, the interesting thing is, the G-Graspers are not like the G-Force from the Heisei era. G-Force from the Heisei era was a multinational Godzilla countermeasures assault team. Even the name itself, it technically is the UNGCC. This is a super nerd moment, but the UNGCC was basically the main organization funding G-Force. UNGCC being the United Nations Godzilla Countermeasures Center. So yeah, like I said, it's a multinational coalition fighting against Godzilla. So if you notice very closely, it moves like Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. They took extreme measures in their writing to make sure people notice this. In Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, you had, I'll admit, very brief moments, but you had moments of other nationalities in the Godzilla franchise. We had white actors, we had a African American actor here or there, basically to kind of exemplify that even though it's Japan's problem, other nations are working to deal with it, which honestly had not been Well, yeah, it had been a factor in the Heisei era, in not King Ghidorah, but it had been a factor in Biollante in 1984, how other nations are dealing with the Godzilla problem. So to me, seeing it downgrade in this franchise was somewhat of a bummer because G. Graspers in Godzilla vs. Megaguirus is more of a low budget operation. I mean, they're still government funded. The thing is, they're like I said, they're government funded still, but they're more low budget. You know, they operate out of a broken down warehouse. They have technology, but they don't have enough money to build mechs, which is interesting. It still works most definitely. It just like I said, it's very different from what was established before in the Heisei era, where we had a whole organization, multinational coalition dealing with the Godzilla threat. But moving off that very sidetracked point, so the G Graspers make a new weapon to deal with Godzilla. What do they make? Here comes the pseudoscience. They make a black hole gun, and most science buffs will be like, "Oh, if you make a black hole, regardless of the science to make one, even if you do make one, it will destroy everything in its fucking path for fucking light years around it." Basically destroying Earth and the whole Milky Way galaxy in the process. But in this movie, they made a version of a black hole which basically is self-consuming, I guess. They make the black hole, it appears, it hits its target, it sucks everything in a very short range when you think about it, and then it basically dissolves away like smoke. So the plan is to hit Godzilla with a black hole gun, it sucks him into another dimension or destroys his matter, however it works, and then it will fizzle out of existence, and boom, we win. And to make things even more precise, they mount it onto a satellite, so therefore they hit Godzilla from any point on the planet. I mean, I guess the basic idea behind this is they can hit Godzilla from right angle and from any point on the planet, so they can hit Godzilla while he's out at sea, or hit him while he's on an island, which these things they do try. And then, of course, in the side plot, which becomes the main problem, kind of, the main problem is when they test the Dimension Tide, this dimensional black hole gun mounted on a satellite in space, they rip a hole in dimensions and let in Meganula, which then breeds in our world and creates Megaguirus, which leads to another big problem besides Godzilla. So, like I said, this movie's very heavy on pseudoscience, so to go into that whole thing, which to me is always confusing, every time I watch the movie I always think about how the fuck this works. Okay, so basically, they test Dimension Tide on an abandoned schoolhouse. It works. It sucks the schoolhouse into some other dimension while also tearing it apart. However, it leaves a rift open between the worlds. So, a Meganula, which is the dragonfly from ancient times, it's just a real-life animal, I'll have you know, comes from another dimension, lays an egg, and then heads back to the dimension. This other egg is basically like I don't know what to call it, I guess like a super egg. It's basically a bunch of little eggs attached to a big egg. The big egg will become Megaguirus. The little eggs become Meganulon, which are little creepy crawly versions, which then evolve into Meganula, which are dragonfly versions, which eventually give their energy to bring Megaguirus to full strength, which is a big kaiju-sized version of them. So with that said, so is Megaguirus a mutated monster or a pure natural monster? And there are arguments to both sides when you think about this. Megaguirus is not like Rodan or a lot of monsters in the franchise. And when I say that, I mean his durability. Megaguirus is very fast and big, but basically one shot from Godzilla's heat ray is all it took to kill Megaguirus, which would put her on the same stats as something like Kamacuris or Kumanga, or the giant condor from Godzilla vs. Sea Monster. One shot from the heat ray is enough to end the whole fight, which is what happens in the movie. Not to say it's not epic or anything, it's really well done. I'm just saying that as far as the movie goes, That's what Megaguirus is basically amounts to. But as far as real life science goes, Meganula, the giant dragonfly from the Carboniferous era, was about the size of an eagle or a condor, which is still a very big bug, about the size of what they show in the movie. However, it would not amount to something as big as Megaguirus, which is this big, humongous, like I said, kaiju-sized monstrosity who absorbs radiation from Godzilla. So is it a mutant? Is it a creature from alternate dimension where stuff is mutated in the past? I don't know. Her origin can be simply put as coming from a different dimension. So as far as complicated origins go, it ranks up there with Space Godzilla, which is a whole nother fucking dissection. But I guess I detracted a whole lot. But to sum up the plot, like I said, they make a super weapon, but it creates a problem in the form of Megaguirus. So then the ultimate plot deals with the main character, who is a female lead, dealing with the problem of Godzilla while also trying to get rid of Megaguirus, while also trying to get rid of Godzilla. Which leads to the main title of the movie. I mean, in America it's called simply Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, simplistic, short and simple, but the Japanese title translated fully is Godzilla X Megaguirus G Annihilation Strategy, which is really overblown title, of course, but it's also kind of cool. And it highlights the main point of the movie, which is to kill Godzilla. So with that said, let's move to the cast, shall we? The cast, to me, what makes this movie stand out against so many other Godzilla movies, Millennium or not, it's a very memorable cast of characters. Masato Tanaka is Kariko, which is basically our main character, who would basically influence Tezuka's other films, Tokyo SOS and Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, making a very similar female lead, although not to the quite same level as this one. Basically, her role is that her boss, or actually you could say commanding officer, is killed by Godzilla in an attack in the 90s, which inspires her to vow vengeance against Godzilla and take him on and finally end their battle. So it's a very interesting dynamic. The story, she's a great character, great actor, great actress. And playing off of that is Kudo, played by Shizuki Tanahara. It's kind of a budding romance between them, but it's actually more conflict between their different strategies of how to deal with the situation. He's more laid back and, of course, non-confrontational, and she's more heads-on with the battle techniques. So, yeah, it's very interesting how they, interact, and it's interesting. It's a lot better than interaction with Godzilla 2000, which I didn't like at all. Then, of course, we have Masato Eve as Sagura, the very corrupt conspiracy guy in the government who creates a lot of havoc, as we find out later on in the story. We need to watch the movie, and I'm not going to go super into it, because, like I said, unlike Godzilla 2000, where Godzilla was destroying energy resources with no explanation, in this movie, it's described as it is in the Heisei era. He's here to feed off our power supply, whether it be radiation or nuclear. So it's interesting, and basically he's the cause of why Godzilla comes back. And yeah, it's interesting, and he added, an interesting human villain. No aliens, no time traveling, just an interesting, corrupt human villain. And then to sum up anything, that's really super relevant as far as human characters go, we also have Yuriko Hoshi as Professor Yoshino. She was one of the main characters from Mothra vs. Godzilla in 1964, and Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, also in 1964. Both times playing a reporter type of character. And here she's a scientist who was scarred by the damage Godzilla wreaked in the 90s, and she's trying to right the wrongs that were done. And she does a really good job. Glad to have her, and I believe she does come back in Godzilla Final Wars, although not to the same degree she plays in here. So yeah, It's very interesting. Uh, Overall, to me, the human cast is much better put together than it would be in Godzilla 2000, and much better put together than it would be Godzilla Final Wars. And the dynamics between the characters, between government and soldiers and scientists, it all comes together very well, and I just love it. It made the movie very worth watching, even when it starts off kind of slow after the main opening piece. But it holds together very well. Like I said, as far as story structure goes, like I said, Godzilla himself, he's much better characterized as the anti-hero here, unlike the random force of nature he was in Godzilla 2000, where it's kind of unclear what he represents. Godzilla 2000, I guess you could say it's kind of more subtle, with the whole Godzilla's each inside every one of us, which can be confusing when you think about it, and nonsensical in a lot of ways. But here it's pretty simple. Godzilla is what he was in Heisei era. He's a force of nature, and if we leave him alone and don't disturb him, he won't, he won't mess with us either. But when they do abuse their power and try to advance science to a degree it shouldn't be advanced, things get all fucked up. Godzilla comes back, and it leads to a fucking cavalcade of problems. So, to me, Godzilla is very interesting here. He's definitely not the hero. If he helps, it's only inadvertently helping. Basically, the only way he helped here was he killed Megaguirus, making the job somewhat simpler. But overall, he basically is the villain of the story. And getting to the monsters, I should definitely go into. Godzilla 2000. Godzilla 2000 is a basic design they used once again. This Godzilla looks no different than what we see in Godzilla 2000, which is not a bad thing to me. Although technically, if you're going to do different realities, Godzilla should have looked different to kind of signify that. GMK and Tokyo has always taken time to make Godzilla look different, so people don't get confused. This film didn't do that, so even though there's a completely different characters, completely different background, you might be confused if this takes place in the same reality if you're, an inexperienced fan, because they don't tell you because it looks the same. And yeah, what can I say? It's not really explained that it takes place in a different reality unless you really look into it. So if you're a young fan, like I said, you might get confused, which is how we get the fan boys who say Godzilla Jr. is the Godzilla we see in Godzilla 2000. They don't know what's going on, and it's not to their fault really, because it's not explained in the movies at all. But yeah, moving on. Godzilla is much better defined as a character in this movie to me, and Megaguirus to me is a lot more interesting of a villain than Orga was. We see a lot more of the villain up close and personal, not a flying ship which you can't identify with. It's just a flying, lame-looking ship. Here we get Megaguirus in a number of different forms, which attack humans. They cause mayhem with Dimension Tide. They attack Godzilla. It's all very interesting. And of course, we get the whole comparison to Legion, a 90s Gamera movie, Gamera versus Legion. To me, the whole concept of little monsters turning into bigger monsters who attack the main monster was already used in Godzilla vs. Destroyer and Godzilla vs. Hedorah, so technically speaking, while that's super original, it did not come from the Gamera series, as some people like to point out. But with that said, Megaguirus, Meganulon, Meganula, they all look fantastic. They all sound great. I love the writing behind it, and the effects, for the most part, hold together pretty well, but I'm going to get to that later. Moving on to the actual fight scenes and choreography and cinematography, the movie looks great to me, although some effects are still kind of shoddy. To me, it holds over a little better than it does Godzilla 2000. And not to mention, it goes a little bit beyond Godzilla 2000 in certain aspects, which really makes you wish this movie had a bigger budget so they could go more balls out, or at least render things properly the way they wanted to. And I say that just in simple scenes like, Godzilla rising from the ocean right next to people. It looks freaking fantastic. And they had the balls to actually do something that's never been done before in a Godzilla movie, which is to have a person actually on Godzilla's body. The main character, Kiriko, at one point wants to put a tracker on Godzilla's body, So she actually gets on his scales and rides him for a little bit before firing off a tracking device into his body and then leaping off. This was a great scene. Does it hold together, modern effects wise? Technically speaking, no. It looks kind of shoddy. People won't like it if you're a certain type of, hypercritical special effects person. But to me, it's a really fun idea. They tried the best they could, and to me, it works. So yeah, it looks freaking amazing. And they tried to make it look their best. And writing wise, it's pretty bold. If you look at any other Godzilla movie, the most they've done is have Godzilla step on people or have Godzilla look at people. Not debunking those. Those are great scenes of Godzilla stepping on somebody or Godzilla looking dead into a human's eyes. They're very powerful. But having Godzilla ride somebody, somebody ride Godzilla, sorry, has not been done since not even Godzilla 2014. So, yeah, it's very interesting that they even bothered to do that. And, like I said, a lot of the effects, some work, some don't. Megaguirus' wings, which I guess are supposed to beat really fast, kind of like a hummingbird or, dragonfly in real life. In some shots it works, some it does not. But the basic idea behind it is that Megaguirus is moving so fast that you can't see its wings. But the thing is, cinematography doesn't catch it fast enough. So, sometimes if you're really critical, it won't look as good as you think it should. But to me, it works just fine. I get the idea of what's supposed to be happening. Megaguirus, the fight scenes with Megaguirus look really freaking good. I love how the fight's done. It's a lot more energetic than what we see in Godzilla vs. Orga in Godzilla 2000. That was a very slow, drawn-out fight, which I said before, where basically Godzilla just battering Orga and him just coming back for more abuse. Here we have a very interesting fight, where I said my Godzilla 2000, my Godzilla-thon way back when, that this is a fight where Godzilla is forced to fight without his heat ray, something that is not really seen throughout the entire franchise. We've had fights where Godzilla's heat ray isn't that effective, but 95% of the time it really is. Against any opponent, it batters them brutally, like destroy it. But here we have a fight where Godzilla literally cannot use his heat ray because every time he tries, Megaguirus absorbs his energy, kind of like a leech or a bat. And then Megaguirus ends up using the energy against Godzilla. So the dynamics of the fight, where Godzilla's fighting someone who's faster than him, who takes away their power, takes away his power, it makes it one of the best fights in the Millennium series to me, and one of the best fights in the whole franchise. Also, Godzilla Megaguirus is very different from all the Godzilla movies, especially the Millennium era, where it would aim towards campiness in the fight scenes, but only to a certain degree. Final Wars would take it too far with things like the soccer ball scene, which are just fucking laughable and should not have been included at all. But this movie takes a much more, I won't say it's subtle, I guess, that's the wrong word, but it aims to be fun with the fights, but not to, a super ridiculous level. Like here we have definitely more stylized fighting that would happen later on in the series and what had happened before. Here we have shots like Godzilla doing the classic, more cartoonish thing like, ducking to avoid Megaguirus. And I guess the logic is that Megaguirus is moving so fast because those spines are so sharp, it ends up cutting off one of her claws, which is freaking epic. And then we have more, comedic things like Godzilla jumping into the air as big as he is, of course, and landing on Megaguirus in an epic body slam. These simple things are very fun, and should it be included in a modern era of Godzilla? Probably not. Before what at the time I thought it was pretty interesting. I saw this movie back on the Sci-Fi Channel way back when I was a kid, probably like in my early teens, and for what I were worth, I thought the fight was really fun and interesting, very different, and should be, like I said, should be replicated in the future. Probably not for the new era, but for what it is, I think it worked really well and made it a lot more exciting fight than what we see. Like I said, I hate to keep bringing it up, more exciting fight than we see in Godzilla 2000. And like I said, this movie has a lot more better characterization for Godzilla as far as the humans go. There's a lot of moments in the movie which secure the fact that Godzilla remembers Kiriko, and it's it's a vendetta, it's a death match. There are a lot of shots where Godzilla stares right at Kiriko, and the message is clear. Godzilla remembers her, she remembers him. Boom. It's not like Godzilla 2000 where there's no connection between these monsters and the humans. It's something they completely botched in that movie. And I guess to really, sum up the whole movie, and then of course there's the music by Masaki Tezuka. I mean, not as a director, my bad. Michiru Oshima, who did the score for also the other Masaki Tezuka films. And like I said, just like the cinematography, the monster fights, and the story, the music is so much more energetic. So much more energetic than what we get in Godzilla 2000 that it just blows it out of the water. It has subtle sad moments, not too many, but subtle moments here and there, and the music really adds so much character to the fights. It's just awesome. You have the creeping little themes for when there's little horror moments. They have the epic battle themes. Of course, just to add the epic bum bum, bum bum, bum 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 that would become iconic with Michiru Oshima. And I think a lot of people would agree with me that she became kind of the Ifukube of the Millennium Era, not only because she came back enough times to do Godzilla's score, she came back for 3 out of the 6 movies, but she also gave Godzilla a definitive theme. And to me, of all the Godzilla themes that she did, all the Godzilla score she did, I think to me this ranks kind of above the 2 Kiru films because this was more energetic. But like I said, this just goes, like I said, towards the tone of the movie. But like I said, overall, this movie beats Godzilla 2000 because it's more energetic, has a more entertaining story, more entertaining fights, more entertaining human characters. It just did more with the writing to make it stand out more, even if it didn't work comedic-wise or, cheese-wise or pseudoscience-wise. Most definitely, there's a lot of holes in the story. But this movie entertains, and that's why I love this one so much. Overall, I'll definitely give it like a 9 out of 10. It's one of the most enjoyable Godzilla movies, definitely one of the most enjoyable Millennium movies. And yeah, it did a lot right. That would be, take it even further in GMK, and then kind of castrated and fucked over in Godzilla Final Wars. Godzilla vs. Megaguirus is definitely one of the best Godzilla movies to me, and for a lot of reasons. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely do see it. And if you haven't seen the end credits, stay tuned for that. If I had any criticisms beyond the whole, certain special effects and certain story plot holes, it's just the whole concept behind. I love Tezuka as a director. The only problem with the Godzilla was he was afraid to show bloodshed. I don't know for what reason, really. But I guess it just has to do with the whole way he wanted to portray the monsters. If you look at the early Showa Godzilla movies, they're afraid to show blood as well. And Tsuburaya used 2 reasons behind it. Number one reason, he wanted kids to be able to enjoy movies without, overt violence. And the second one was logic they were gods, you reduce the godliness of character by making them bleed, which makes sense. So in the first few films, there was no blood, really. Aside, Godzilla raids again, where Godzilla bit into Anguirus' neck and killed him. But of course, that didn't really include the main crew from the 60s Godzilla movies, so of course they diverged. It wouldn't be for a long time until 1968 where we would see Ghidorah bleed from his neck as Godzilla and other monsters beat the shit out of him. Masaki Tezuka follows a similar thing here. There's no bloodshed in this movie. Even when Megaguirus' stinger stabs into Godzilla's stomach, there should be a lot of blood there. However, we don't see that because, for his own personal reasons, I'm not really sure why. So, to make the battle more gritty, that definitely to me should have been included. Just like Mechagodzilla stabbing Godzilla in the stomach with his freaking drill hand should have included a lot of blood. And if it had been the Heisei era, this would have been included. They had more realism in that department, When Godzilla got stabbed with the shock anchor cables in the 1993 film, or slashing into Godzilla himself with Biolante's tendril attack or Destroyer's horn attack, They took the time to include these things because it made the fight stand out more. But still, all together though, this movie holds together very well. It's one of the best Millennium series this Dissection has gone on for a really long time. Probably one of my longest ones yet. But to me, there's a lot to say about this movie, and yeah, it hits on many different levels. It's entertaining, it's symbolic in a lot of ways, it's fun, it's funny, it has a lot of action, it's cheesy in a lot of ways too, but it all comes together to make a very entertaining movie. Josh out.